Hey guys, Mana here, bringing you another episode of More Dots. This is episode 6, and as usual, I got a lot of cool questions to answer, so let's get right to it. Alright, first question from the Links videos. Hey Mana, just a quick question. For absolute min-maxing, is Orc still the best horde race, with the free trinket and pet damage, or has Goblin or Troll overtaken them? I imagine Orc is still top dog, but I'm not a theory crafter, so I don't know. Thanks. Well, at this point, for absolute min-maxing, Orcs are still considered the best horde race for Warlocks. I should add, though, that the difference between Orcs, which provide the best damage boost, and, for instance, Undead or Blood Elves that basically don't provide anything, isn't really that extraordinary. It's not really that big a deal. In my opinion, most players should just choose their race based on what looks good to them, because very few people actually need to worry about min-maxing to the point where they'll race change, you know? These are the people that are at the tip-top of rating progression, and they need every extra little bit out of all their players in order to get the world first kill or something. Alright, next question from Deuce Bigalock, which is possibly the best name ever. By now I'm sure you've heard about Warlocks getting a male succubus. What do you think about this? Alright, well, first thing I gotta say is that people are getting way too excited about this. People are on both sides of the argument here because apparently there's people for and against this addition to the game. Look, the Blue Post said, "This is a task already in our system, though I don't have a time frame for you at the moment. Other art tasks could always take precedence, but we're committed to making this happen." So right off the bat, everybody should know that this change isn't going to come for a while. Alright, this is not being given any sort of priority, and yeah, it's not going to happen for a while. So I don't know why people are saying that Blizzard is wasting time doing this now when they're not doing this now. They're just saying that they're going to do it at some point in the future. So yeah, that's the first thing I got to say. Second of all, this whole thing started because a gay WoW player made a thread and it got a blue reply. Now, some people look at that as Blizzard giving in to the gay players in the WoW community for whatever reason. Now look, I don't have a problem with gay people at all, so I don't see a problem with changes that make the game friendlier to them. That said though, the fact that the guy that made the thread is gay is completely irrelevant, and it didn't really add anything to what he actually wanted, which was to have options that are purely cosmetic when choosing our demon, which is something that, to my surprise, so many people seem to be against. So yeah, I don't mind this change at all, and I can't wait to use my male succubus and my female Felguard. Alright, next question from Metalaries. I've read on forums that it's actually better to recast Immolate rather than use Fellflame to refresh the dot, as it's a DPS decrease to do so. Also, do you not use Cursive Elements? Alright, so first of all, what you read is true. This is something a lot of Warlocks just don't seem to know for whatever reason. Refreshing Immolate or Unstable Affliction with Fellflame isn't as good as just casting Immolate or Unstable Affliction. The only time you should really be using Fellflame is either when you're 4-piece tier 11 procs, or when you're moving. None of your dots need to be refreshed, and life tapping is either not an option or a necessity. Alright, as for Cursive Elements, yeah, of course I use it. Thing is that it lasts so long that it's not something I typically include in a spell priority list. Again, because it lasts so long, you know, it's not something you're going to be casting all throughout the fight. In most cases, you just cast it once at the beginning and then maybe once at the end, and that's about it. But yeah, I apologize if there was any confusion. You should always have Cursive Elements on your current target. There really isn't any reason not to have it. Alright, so next question from someone who chose to remain anonymous. Hey Mana, I've started raiding recently and I'm having trouble performing well. I keep myself completely up to date on my class and all raid encounters. I don't have particularly amazing gear, but it isn't bad either. When I'm raiding, I just get so nervous that I can't do anything fast enough, and I often fail on boss mechanics because of this. Is there anything I can do to make myself less nervous when I'm raiding? Okay, so I chose this question for several reasons. First of all, this is a problem that I used to have, and it wasn't easy to overcome it. In my opinion, the nervousness comes from this pressure to perform well. You know, DPS is the most overrepresented role, and in my opinion, it's the most competitive. You know, if you've ever been in the bottom of DPS meters after several wipes, you know, even if the wipes aren't a DPS issue, you know that there's a lot of people that aren't exactly thinking very highly of you. So you just have this insane pressure to perform well, or else you're at risk of just being replaced. And, you know, DPS is not hard to replace. So it just becomes this vicious cycle because you keep performing worse and worse with more and more pressure to perform better. So how do you overcome this? Well, look, the most important thing is to accept that it's okay to be on the bottom of the DPS meters. If you take 10 amazing players and have them DPS a boss for a few minutes and then look at the DPS meters, one of them's going to be on top and one of them's going to be on the bottom. Does being in the bottom mean he's a bad player? No, absolutely not. Your job is not to be on top of the DPS meters. When you're fighting a boss, you should never have, I wonder where I am on the DPS meters, derp, on your mind. Never have that on your mind. Your only job is to DPS the boss and to execute boss mechanics correctly. Even if you are on the bottom of the DPS meters, as long as you execute mechanics correctly and perform adequately, you will not be replaced. You're not going to be replaced at all. I cannot stress how much a raid leader values someone who can move out of the rings on Archimedes over someone who just sits there, gets top DPS for a few seconds, and then dies. Like I said before, I had this huge amount of pressure to perform well, and I would get so nervous. But finally, when I accepted that getting top DPS wasn't my responsibility and just played as well as I could while still executing boss mechanics, I started to improve dramatically and actually start getting top DPS without trying to get it. Oh, and actually one more thing. Make sure when you're raiding, you play comfortably. Personally, I always raid with my favorite pair of jeans and also with shoes on. I don't know, it's comfortable to me, and that's when I raid best for whatever reason. Just try playing as comfortably as you can. I think you'll also see some improvements there. Alright, so to be honest, I kind of wanted to answer this question a little bit better, but I figured I would extend the question to you guys. What do you do to get in the zone when you're raiding? How do you perform well under pressure? Because I would think that there's still pressure when you're raiding. I mean, I would be surprised if there's anyone that didn't feel any pressure at all. Do you have any pre-raid rituals, any tricks, or anything that just helps you perform better? Something like my lucky jeans that helped me a lot. But yeah, just please leave it in the comments below because I would love to know about it. In addition to that, if you guys have any questions for next week's episode of More Dots, leave them in the comments below or in a private message, and if it's good, I'll definitely answer it. And finally, if you enjoyed what you saw, feel free to like and to subscribe. Later, guys.